Hi everyone, we are very glad that you joined us today. The topic of our webinar today is Introduction to ODA Object Model, and that means we'll provide the overview of the key classes and steps that are necessary to work with all ODA supported formats. Let us start with our diagram and enumerate the formats supported by ODA SDKs and the manipulations available for those formats. The formats are DWG and its extensions, DGN, different versions of IFC including the upcoming release candidate, Autodesk Revit, and Autodesk Navisworks formats. As for the manipulations, we can access the data, stored in the files, create the files from the scratch, publish, visualize, or set up collaboration procedures. Moving to the very top of the hierarchy, we need to pay attention to the ODAX object class. It is an important part of the smart pointers concept used in ODA platform. It is an abstract class and is used for deriving new classes. Among its methods we have numRefs, virtual method, returns the value of the reference counter, addRef, pure virtual method, increments the reference counter, release, pure virtual method, decrements the reference counter. Those methods are important when we work with the template class OD Smart PTR, or OD Smart Pointer as we call it, to count the references of the referenced object and etc. All database classes have corresponding typified smart pointer classes with the PTR suffix. For example, the ODDB circle pointer class is the smart pointer to the instances of the ODDB circle class. ODGI drawable is the base class for all graphical objects. And the ODRX system services and ODDB base host app services classes are in charge for platform-dependent file operations and platform-specific operations with ODA platform accordingly.
Let us have a more detailed look at the ODAX object class. Briefly speaking, we can divide all methods of this class into three groups: standard methods, constructors, and destructors, description-related methods, methods that return, check, or use associated description. For instance, desc method that returns the raw pointer to the class describing instance statically associated with this object as the ODAX object. And the third group, reference counting, addRef, release, and numRefs, methods that were already mentioned. They are used to count the references to the object, thus taking part in the implementation of the smart pointers approach. One more class that is worth a special attention is the OD Smart Pointer class. Class OD Smart Pointer is a template class, and in its implementation we see the methods of the ODAX object being used. For instance, addRef or release methods. That is actually how the references of the object are considered. Now, a deeper overview of the ODAX object derived classes. ODGI drawable class. ODGI drawable class is the base class for raw graphical objects. As it goes from the name, that is an object that can be actually drawn. That means that every graphical object will be inherited from ODGI drawable or derived classes and will implement the methods of this class. Let us have an overview of those methods. Drawable type returns the type of the graphical object. Here is the enumeration of those types. Next, draw methods. World draw and viewport draw. Overriding these methods in a derived class allows to redefine the appearance of the derived object being drawn. So actually, we here in these methods in the derived class implement how the object should be drawn on a viewport or not on a viewport. The next item is persistent. All database objects may be divided into two groups: persistent objects that are stored in the database and not persistent objects that aren't. So this method returns us the flag that shows whether or not the object we're currently working with is stored in the database. And the next method we'll pay attention to right now is the getGeom_extends. Quite often it's necessary to get the top left, bottom right and whatever points of the graphical object, or in other words the area necessary to draw it. And getGeom_extends method returns the WCS bounding box that represents the extents of the entity. So it is possible to zoom the entity to the full screen, for instance. Probably you even saw a function called zoom to extents in our applications. Actually, this function uses this method.
The next block is dedicated to formats. These key classes should help to understand the format representation in the ODA platform when the actual file is read and loaded. It is represented as an object of a database. Depending on the particular format, it is an ODDB database for DWG ODXF, or an ODDG database for DGN, or an ODBM database for Autodesk Revit, or ODNW database for Autodesk Navisworks. All those databases have a similar chain of inheritance, going through the ODRX object, ODGI drawable, also having some object class for DWG, Revit and Navisworks. The only significant exception is the ODIFC file that inherits directly from ODRX object. Okay, we've got a database object, but what does this database look like? Simply speaking, every database is a set of containers that include objects. So, passing through the database is passing through those containers. To do it, ODA platform provides iterators. Basic iterator classes are also derived from ODRX object class. They may be general purpose iterators or iterators for a particular container. Iterator classes have a method to return the object the iterator points to. It may be done through returning the object ID. In this case, you will need to use OpenObject or SaveOpenObject methods to open the object for read or write. A database may contain many different entities and containers, and of course, iterating from the very start to the necessary object may be very time-consuming. Thus, usually, we have methods that return IDs of the key elements of the database directly. For instance, a getModel space ID for ODDB database when working with DWG DXF database.
It is also necessary to add an illustration of the difference between OpenObject and Safe OpenObject. As you can see, both methods use the OpenObject method with 3 parameters, but OpenObject just returns the value, while Safe OpenObject analyzes the result and throws an exception if the result is not successful. So, using OpenObject, please do not forget to analyze the return value. In case of a failure, it will be null. And using Safe OpenObject, please don't forget to provide the correct exception processing.
As a conclusion to this part, I would like to enumerate the key points. ODRX object and OD Smart Pointer as the base for the implementation of the Smart Pointer concept. Services classes to implement platform-dependent file operations and operations with the ODA platform. Database objects that represent a file being read by ODA platform. Iterators that allow to pass through the database and object IDs to access a particular object in a database. The next block, manipulations. Now, considering the information provided before, let us have a look at how we can perform various operations with the formats. This slide illustrates what we need to get the database object, the representation of the file in our code. Though the extracts are provided for different formats, but the code is quite similar. First, we create a services class inheriting both system and host app services classes. Please pay attention that depending on a particular format, we use different variants of the classes to consider the format specifics where necessary. Next, we create an object of the services class and initialize it. Again, depending on the format, we may need to perform additional initialization and/or load additional models. Finally, we create a smart pointer to a database object to obtain the result of the read file method. As I said at the beginning, the steps are almost the same for all formats.
You can also see that the classes on the slide are not the base ones, but the derived classes. If we open the documentation, we can find the inheritance here. For instance, let us do it for OX host app services. You can see that between ODDB base host app services and X host app services, there are 2 additional classes. Moreover, X host app services also inherits ODDB host app progress meter class. One point to pay attention to is that X host app services header is stored not in include, but in extensions X services folder.
After you read the file, you can perform, for instance, dump of its content. And this will also be quite similar for all formats. As said before, a database is a set of containers. So, to dump the content of the file, you step through all the containers one by one and iterate through the objects in those containers using the iterators. Access to the key containers is granted through special methods like getBlockTableID and others. If you need to create a new file, you should perform a similar set of basic steps again. Create and initialize services, and call createDatabase method instead of read. But that is only a beginning. A proper database should contain some minimal set of containers and entities. Please pay attention to this, as it is overlooked quite often. Particular containers and elements depend on the format we're working with. That is an illustration of quite a popular question. I need just a little red line. Do I need all those tables? Yes, you need them. And the proper step before you populate your database with entities is create the proper structure. This is a screenshot of the DWG model with just one line. As you can see, it includes 10 tables.
Luckily, it is not necessary to do all this manually. CreateDatabase method has two parameters. The first one is flag. When we set it to true, which is a default value, that means that the new database is created with all the necessary default entities. So you do not need to add them all manually. The second parameter sets the measurement units, metric or imperial system, with the imperial system as a default value.
But creating a file from scratch is not always necessary or reasonable. Quite often, we need to import data from one format to our target format. And for ODA supported formats, there are many out-of-the-box import procedures. Import functionality is usually stored in a separate models that may be loaded by demand. Thus, the general steps for the import procedure include creation of the empty database, import model load and importer creation, setting the importer properties, and running the import. Two code extracts on this slide illustrate collided import performed for BMAP, Autodesk Revit support, and drawings, DWG support databases. The code is quite similar.
For imports, please pay attention that the situation varies. For instance, for ODDB database, DWG format, we call createDatabase with the default parameters, not specifying anything explicitly. While for ODBM database, Autodesk Revit format, we read a special template file that includes several necessary containers.
Export works almost the same, but at the initial stage, you have a database that includes some data. All the rest steps are the same. You load and export a model and create an exporter. Then it is necessary to set the parameters and run the export. This almost format-agnostic procedure allowed to introduce publish capabilities that provide extended features, like appending additional information to the output PDF document, publishing multiple views, or even combining data of different sources. Those sources may be files of different types, for instance, DGN and Revit. The key concepts of the visualization is the graphic system device and Graphic System View. Graphic System View implements viewport objects, and Graphic System Device actually owns, updates, and refreshes the view objects. You can create your custom implementation of the Graphic System Device. For example, you can refer to vectorized examples, OD Vectorize X for instance.
In the kernel archive, you can find 6 device projects: WinBitmap, WinComposite, WinDirectX, WinGDI, WinGL ES2, and WinOpenGL. They may be used out of the box, or may be used as an example of a graphic device implementation. Currently, the key development focus is on WinGL ES2 device, and all the new enhancements and features are implemented for this device.
ODA platform provides several implementations of the graphic system device that may be used. And usage of the devices is quite similar for different formats. As you see, only 2 lines, create DB context and set up DB drawing views, have some format specifics. This low dependency on the format specifics allowed to introduce the general purpose visualization technique, which requires some rich models to consider the format specifics, and after that, you work with the visualized database. This provides possibilities for extended visualization features, like combining different formats on one view, and also discloses collaboration capabilities through visualization in web or information exchange through mockups. Thank you very much for joining us today. That's all for now, and we hope that today's webinar will help you to have a deeper dive in the technical side of ODA platform and will help it to use it more efficiently.
Hello again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attention, for your questions. I think it will be reasonable to review the questions that were already sent and probably provide some additional information, and probably some of you will have further questions during our discussion. The first question was about the recording of this session. Yes, it will be available after slide post-processing. We will upload this video to our YouTube channel, so it will be available for everybody. What's next? Is it possible to implement the IFC and DWG based application using drawings.net and IFC.net Suite wrapper models? Yes, that's possible because both C++ underlying C++ parts are compatible, and .NET parts do not introduce something special, so you just reference an additional intermediate glue assembly into your project and work almost the same manner, because for instance we have example of exporting IFC geometry to a DWG file, and we also are working on importing data from DWG to IFC, so both these examples require simultaneous work with both SDKs, and as I said, the wrappers do not introduce something special that could lead to conflicts. As I said also, and as I've written, we do not have use cases or examples due to the fact that wrappers for IFC were introduced not so long ago, but we have examples when, for instance, visualize and drawings are used in one example. It is our ODA viewer MGD. It is in the visualize.net archive, and it is a WPF example that uses both visualize and drawings wrappers to visualize a DWG model. The next question. Hello, is there a way to translate DWG to IFC file by using the IFC SDK? Yes, as I said about DWG to IFC and etc. As for the import of data from DWG to IFC, we're working on this. So the first question is, yes, it is possible. There is a way, but the exact implementation is in progress. So you can try and implement it on your own, but I think it's more reasonable to wait until it will be available out of the box with our SDKs. And vice versa, it is possible to export the IFC geometry to a DWG file. Let's move on further. Is there a guide available to help us generate .NET from custom C++ classes? So if you are a founding member and have access to our, I think even a step back, actually we have two approaches of creating .NET wrappers above C++ code. The one is implemented in drawings.NET Classic archive, and it is a manual implementation using managed C++. We have another approach of generating wrappers, C# wrappers above the C++ code using an auxiliary tool, so in an automated way. Briefly speaking, you write the rules of data marshalling to and from managed to native, native to managed code, and you provide these rules and your headers to a third-party tool and get the wrappers and the glue code that actually provides the connection between your wrappers and this underlying C++. If you are a founding member, you have access to our Git repositories, thus you have all those files with rules and similar things, so you can see how we manage to generate wrappers for our classes, for our custom classes. If you do not have access to our Git repository and are not our founding member, I think it's better to address that, for instance, me, using my email or to our support address, support at opendesign.com, and describe the situation, because we'll be glad to share our practices and to give some prompts on the issue. So it is possible, but there is no some ready-to-use universal guide, because actually I do not think it's possible to provide something at the same time universal and really informative. So it's necessary to investigate a particular situation. Okay, what's next? A continuation of the question. We've got a WPF application with drawings.NET and need to add the IFC.NET model to support IFC. Is it compatible to implement drawings.NET in a single application, the same type of viewport? You see, I have some doubts about the term viewport in this particular situation, because if you wish to have two different models of two different types on one view, probably it's necessary to introduce some changes in the approach. If it is just it depends. It depends on your particular implementation and how your application processes the model and what should be the final result. Because, for instance, merging and showing multiple models of different types is the task that is implemented by our Visualize SDK. So on one view, you can have models of different types, but it implements the approach that is initially a multi-format approach. So overall, working with both drawings.NET and IFC.NET is possible in one application, but this particular case needs additional information to provide an exact and reliable question, I would say so. But overall, yes, it's possible, but as for details, it's necessary to have a deeper dive into your exact application and on how it is implemented and on what the final result should be. Where is the class hierarchy? Can we find types, read, write, create, point cloud? About the point cloud, unluckily, point cloud documentation is in progress now. We have the initial materials, but it's not finished yet. So it requires some more work. If you need some particular information, again, please address us through support and or to my direct email as well. We will be glad to provide the necessary information and will of course be very grateful for the feedback, for suggestions, for priorities on what to start with, on what to emphasize. Probably we'll be able to introduce some adjustments based on your feedback right now on the fly. So please communicate us. And this I mentioned about the example. We are using Tiga.net for manipulation DLG DXF files. Is there a direct backward compatible replacement for Tiga.net, a new line of products? Yes, you see, the situation is the following. Tiga is the name that is not used anymore for quite a long time, several years already. And now Drawings SDK is the SDK that provides native support for DWG and DXF, and Drawings.net correspondingly is the replacement for Tiga.net. So that is the SDK you need to work with. Please pay attention that for all SDKs it's necessary to have kernel as the mandatory prerequisite, and do not forget that Drawings.net is just a set of wrappers. So you need first the underlying C++, kernel, and Drawings, the C++ SDKs, and Drawings.net on top to manipulate and to work. I would suggest you to address me, because switching from Tiga, as it is spelled as Tiga, that means that it's quite an old version compared to the most recent one. Address me or support. We'll try to help you to switch and to upgrade to the newer version, because there were some significant changes that require attention. Of course, depending on the complexity of your application, the situation may vary, but in cases of upgrade, I would suggest you to address us, so that upgrade process would be more efficient and more smooth. Are there features, the next question, are there features in Revit files that are available via Autodesk Revit but not via BIM-RV? You see, it's possible to analyze from the following points the differences. The first one is the access to data stored in the file, in RVT or RFA file. From this point of view, BIM-RV SDK provides 100% access to data, that you have all the data, you can get access to all the data stored in the file. What's interesting, that there are even some parameters that are not available through Autodesk Revit API. But the most significant difference is that, let's say, Revit API operates with calculated parameters. If oversimplifying the situation, you've got a length and width in a file, but Revit API returns you the square. So we're also working in this direction to adjust BIM-RV API to have a more habitual appearance and more expected behavior for people who have experience with Autodesk Revit API. But there may be probably still some differences. The main and the most significant difference and limitation of BIM-RV SDK is the creation and editing support, because our creation still needs, it's a priority direction for us, but implementing creation is quite complex, and thus it goes not so as quickly as we would like it to go. We have an FAQ, and in our FAQ you can easily find the current creation support that is available through our BIM RV API. I hope I answered your question. If not, please send the question. There are more details that I'll be glad to provide. Is it possible to initialize ODDB instance directly from IFC file? I'm afraid I didn't get the question quite well, because to initialize ODDB database instance, you need the drawings SDK, and to create an empty ODDB database anyway, you need a drawings SDK, and after you have it, you can transfer some data from IFC file to this database. So I'm afraid this, could you please provide a more detailed question on, or probably a description of the use case or a capability you would like to implement, because for now this question doesn't look quite clear. Why is the X-host app services header in an extra folder? You see, it's according to the architecture project architecture rules. So the basics got into the include folder, and this is more about particular extensions. Thus, it is in the extensions folder. So it's a by design situation. Using ODDB face record, I can access to vertices, but their values are negative. Could you explain why, please? It depends on the situation. It is better to write to support to provide probably a file and a small code extract, so we could give you an exact answer based on exact information. So please send us this description of the situation and the file to reproduce. I think it's better to support at opendesign.com, and we'll provide the exact explanation, investigate the case with you. .NET Core support, any chances? In long-term perspective, we have .NET Core support, but for now there are tasks and goals that are that have a higher priority for our membership community, and thus the efforts right now are focused on these goals. As soon as .NET Core support will become more important for our membership community, so the development priorities will change, and this task will be scheduled. But for now, there are no exact estimations about the .NET Core support. The next question: I'm starting to develop a DG and DLG importer for OpenSceneGraph. Do you have any example how I should start? Basically need information how to tessellate graphics objects like circles, knobs, objects, etc. Yes, we have examples more or less related to what you're describing. Again, could you please write to support not to lose track of this example, and we will provide you links. Probably I will ask some questions to clarify your situations, to point you to more exact examples. So that's the topic that's with the legacy, I would say. So there are some approaches, so examples, questions already answered. So please write and we'll send you the appropriate information. Have you a model library for geometrical operations, Boolean operations between solids, meshing, and yes, you see, we have two approaches. Initially, we did not have such a model, and we suggested third-party models for this task, but we are working for our facet and solid modelers, and we have even a video from our previous conference describing the current possibilities on our YouTube channel, the DevCon 2020. So you can get an impression of what capabilities we provide right now. Again, you can write to me or to support. I will provide you this link, the corresponding information, and the available capabilities. Probably you can in an email provide a more detailed description of what you wish to achieve, what tasks you wish to perform. So again, we could warn you about some limitations in a more exact manner. Okay. To support and render IFC and DWG files, do we need to visualize model also? If you see, the situation is the following. Visualize Archive allows to perform the general, the multi-format visualization. Our next webinar will be dedicated to our multi-format visualization. So again, it depends on your task. If you plan or wish, or it will be more reasonable to work in a multi-format approach from the very scratch, it is reasonable to use Visualize, because you will, in this case, you will work with the visualization of different formats in the same manner. But if you need to keep some format specifics, some explicit format specifics, it is possible and it's reasonable to perform the visualization without Visualize, using just the available graphic devices that are available in the archive. So both approaches. But if yes, you need to integrate. Yes, the list of archives that should be merged and used for the application that uses IFC, DWG, and Visualize is correct. They are kernel, drawings C++, drawings.net, IFC C++, IFC.net, Visualize C++, and Visualize.net. That's a correct list of modules that should be utilized for this task. Looking at Drawings SDK, I think, but I can't find any info over CPU architecture and OSs. It is available. I think about possibility to use it on the server side, and a link is provided. Just a minute. It is possible to get the information on the member page, and the information you are requesting. Just a moment. I will share my screen and show you where it is located. I hope you can see my screen now. In the member center, right here on the main page, the link will look like opendesign.com/members/member files. On the download item, you can choose Visualize SDK, and this will provide you the list of operation systems available but for our regular members, trial members get access to only Windows release and Visual Studio 2017 archives only. Regular members get access to the full set of archives for different platforms, for different Visual Studio versions in case of Windows, and for different configurations. Release, debug, multi-threaded, static, dynamic, whatever. Okay, and the next. If you cannot find it yourself, please also write me. I will send you the full set of archives available for regular members, or just a screenshot of the SDKs available. Or we can have a short call. Also, if you need some and wish to discuss something not in public but one-on-one, also feel free to write. We will be able to set up a call and to discuss some things that you wouldn't like to share privately, just to provide you the correct information. Drawings, C++, drawings.net include a hidden line removal functionality. Yes, hidden line removal algorithms are implemented for not only drawings, but in drawings SDK they are also utilized. For instance, our model documentation feature uses this hidden line removal functionality. It's a capability more of the graphic devices, not of the drawings SDK itself, but it is available. You can, for instance, open some visualize example, open a model and play around with the visual styles like grayscale or others, and to see how this feature is utilized. Hello, is it possible to put all the necessary libraries, especially the TX file, in a specified path in a subfolder of the application folder, and the system can load the libraries automatically? We do try to use manifest file to solve this problem. It's not work for TX files. Actually, it should be possible. I probably need to double check with the dedicated engineers, because actually TX files are the same DLL files, but with a special extension just to distinguish them from other files and to be able to find them quicker and in a more easy way. So the thing you described, I think, should be possible, but probably some minor adjustments should be introduced. Also, just not to lose of sight this issue, it would be good if you write me, and I would double check and provide you with an exact answer of how to implement this correctly. Is there a diagram or a document describing the dependencies between the different libraries and which models are needed for specific functions? A rough overview. It is in progress. We reviewed and recently our documentation exactly, as you mentioned, found out and revealed that our determining which libraries to use page gives only a rough overview. So this topic is reworked, and we are also in progress with preparing short examples that illustrate how to pick up the necessary libraries. If you have some urgent situation and need to get an exact answer right now, please send me. But overall, this topic is in progress, and soon we will update the determining which libraries to use topic in the documentation, so it gives a more exact and correct answer and is more helpful. Are there plans to provide Linux builds for ARM processes? You see, the situation in this area is the following. We have, I would say, a practice of helping our members to build Linux for ARM processes for particular ARM configuration. You see, it is quite a time and resource consuming situation, because we need to reproduce all the environment on our site, and it's a bit separate task, because quite often only one member requires the situation. But we have such practice. We have several members for whom we helped to get the Linux builds for particular ARMs, but usually those were, I would say, members with quite serious intentions. So those were either founding members or sustaining that we're going to upgrade to founding membership to get a build of one ARM with our help, and then get acquainted with the techniques, with the approaches, and be able to adjust it for new ARMs if it is necessary for their tasks, and when it is necessary for their tasks and for their work. So you can write me if you have some exact ARM. Probably we have some experience already with it and can give you some prompts. But for now, the situation is as I said, it's a bit separate situation. Thank you, Alexander. I'm just gonna thank you, Yuri, for visiting, for attending. Hello, we are working with drawings C++. Is there any import from RVT or RFA to DWG? It's an interesting question, because you see, I'm afraid to provide an incorrect information. Just a moment. As far as I remember right now, there is nothing just that can be used out of the box, just to load an RVT file and get a DWG output. But we had some work in this area. I think again, it depends on the particular situation, on what data you would like to move from RVT or IFA to DWG. So probably we can discuss it via direct emails, this situation, and I'll be glad to provide something that matches your case. Will you explain the Publish SDK in more detail in upcoming webinars? If it is interesting, we can organize a survey. If this topic will be interesting to our members, we will easily organize a dedicated webinar. But in this webinar series, we had no plans of providing the dedicated information about the Publish SDK. But as I said, probably other webinar attendees can vote for your question, and if so, if we have strong interest, it's quite an interesting SDK, quite promising. It's really a cool approach of sharing CAD and BIM data with people who do not own some special CAD or BIM software. So in the workflows of contractors, subcontractors in the architecture area, it may be quite efficient, and with all those animation and similar stuff. So we'll keep an eye on that. And as I said, setting a dedicated webinar is not a problem if we have and see a really strong interest to this topic. Which IFC format are you compatible? Just to input or also to export? Are you certified from Building Smart? We are not certified for now. We are more focused on implementation of the standards, of the versions of the standards. We support all standards starting with 2x3 and finishing with 4x3 release candidate 2. So all the line of those versions of IFC are supported by our IFC SDK for reading, writing, editing, etc. As for certification, that we have this topic in our plans, because that would be a cool advantage for the usage of our IFC SDK to use a certified one. But for now, we are more focused on the implementation of the versions of IFC and similar things and related stuff. That's great that we have so many questions. As I said, the next webinar for now probably something somebody is still thinking of the question. The upcoming webinar will be on May 5th. It will be dedicated to multi-format visualization. So please do not hesitate to visit it. Also, please do not hesitate to send us your feedback about this webinar. It was probably a starting point only, but we found it necessary to provide information about the very basics, probably for people who have experience with our SDK. That wasn't very informative, but it's necessary to have some starting point. Any your feedback, any your suggestions, like the webinar about Publish SDK or whatever, please send us. This is the most valuable information that we can obtain. Probably just feel free to address with any other questions with your particular situation. We'll be glad to provide some suggestions, tips, or best practices if there were similar tasks implemented. Looks no questions for now. Good webinar. Thank you very much. That's very pleasant to read. We try. And okay, then thank you very much for attending, for your time. We'll be waiting for your feedback, for your comments, for your suggestions. Will the webinar be available on your website? It will be obligatory available on our YouTube channel. I think some notes will be in our LinkedIn group. We have a LinkedIn group, so you can address us there as well. Use it as a touch point for connecting us. Probably not so official as through email. I think it's possible to find it, if not just right. Okay, then thank you everybody. Stay safe these hard times. We'll be waiting for you on May 5th, and we'll be waiting for your feedback, comments, and suggestions. Goodbye.